morning, everyone. Welcome to the first round of Ask Abhinav. How we are going to do this, we have youngsters who are starting probably their careers or are in the early stages of the careers. And I wish somebody told me the tricks and tips to do well. So hopefully whatever has been my learning, I have been very lucky. God has been kind and I've had great mentors, great bosses, great colleagues. I would like to share some of my learning, some of my views and suggestions to all of them. So look forward to talking to all of you. So let's start with the questions now. Memati, if you want to go first.
Yes. So one of the reasons I'm studying policy now is because I'm hoping to do impact oriented work to make some kind of difference. This is because I draw some part of my identity from my profession. Is this sort of mindset problematic? How much you let your job define you and give you meaning versus just seeing it as a means to an end?
So it's a very interesting question because I think the later part you alluded, it's a job after all. And I have been part of organizations which are great and great people, and they say that, what is your higher purpose? How do you want to contribute? So I would like to differentiate between the two, right? A job is a job. It's a way to make your livelihood, to provide for your family, do the things you want to do. But at the same time, I feel it's very important to have purpose. How much you fulfill your purpose from your job versus your personal activities is a choice each one of us has to make. But when it comes to impact, I always see what are the two kinds of impact. One is the impact that you will make as an individual, and one is the impact your work will make. And it's important to have an eye on both. For example, one of the impacts that I feel for any professional as you grow is to see how many people you have mentored, how many people will look back and say, oh, I have learned something from this person. Whereas work-wise, it depends, and it's, again, there could be tactical impact, there could be strategic impact, there are very too many theories around it, so I'll not get into that. But to me, it has always been if I have made the life of even one person slightly better through either my work or my individual contribution, that's impact for me. And therefore, I always believe that if I have left a mark, whether it's a human being or an animal or a plant or the ecosystem, whichever way, if it had made them happier, if it has made their lives a bit easier, if it has helped them live a bit longer, uh, I think that's good enough purpose for me and I would have earned my karma.
In my experience, there's a perception that government is a very slow-paced system. So how did you navigate it as you have already worked with the government previously?
So I like that you said perception
Yeah.
because in my experience, government can move much faster than the private sector and tends to do, especially lately when it needs to. I think to some extent, government being slow and purposeful and deliberative is important because you are spending the exchequer's money. It's not a private limited company that you're accountable to your shareholders, who may be a few thousand, few lakhs at the maximum. As a government, you are accountable to the 1.4 billion people of the country. I think what this needs to be set in context as to when you need to be thoughtful and deliberative, and when it's okay to probably make mistakes, but quick action is important, right? And therefore, it's always important to, again, look back at what is the outcome I'm looking at. Does it require immediate action so that we don't lose the window, or it's more important to be accurate and impactful and therefore be deliberative and process driven? So there's a space for both.
So Avinav, you being in the field for quite some time, and me just starting out. So I had a question regarding the jobs. Like, so how would we tell that some jobs that looks great on paper, but are they actually helping us grow? So, like, how do you figure that out?
And I have sort of stumbled onto it. So I don't know whether this answer is right or wrong. It's never a job which is great or not so great. It's always the people you work with. Because eventually it's our interactions, it's the people we speak to. That's whom we learn from, that's whom we grow from. It could be the most mundane of jobs, but as social animals, we need that intellectual fulfillment, And therefore, if it is great people you're working with, great people not just in terms whom you'll enjoy a drink in the evening with, but also people who you will learn how to manage your careers, people from whom you will learn how to manage failures, people from whom you will learn to manage disasters. There are a lot of people who are great at managing success. People who are great at managing failures are relatively few. And therefore, I always tell people it's important early on to identify what kind of mentors you want. And it can be one mentor, two mentors, but ideally quite a few to have in your career whom you can always turn for an unfettered conversation, guidance, and they become more of your friends who are, like a parent would always counsel you from your own interest, but sometimes parents are also blindsided by their love for you, right? They will not see where perhaps you have got wrong or doing something wrong, and therefore it's important to develop these mentors. And I've always believed it's the experience with the people which makes or breaks a job, where some of the things which are non-negotiable are some things you are okay with or maybe even enjoy.
You share an instance where you successfully navigated through differing opinions with your boss without letting him down or showing that you're in an argument with him.
See, I'm by nature a bit of an argumentative person, so has always been difficult. But I've always also been lucky in a way. Most of my bosses, I would not say all, most of my bosses or my mentors have been fairly patient with me. And therefore, what I have learned is keep your mind open, uh, always allow for the possibility that you might be wrong, first. And second, always leave the possibility of walking away from that conversation without affecting your personal relationship. That's very, very important. But then also allow for some flaws. Everybody might have some quirks which you might disagree with. It's important to disagree without being disagreeable. And that always allows you room to walk away and perhaps come back at a time when that person you feel is in a position of understanding your viewpoint better. And that's why it's very important to think through in your head what you want to say rather than being reactive. Three traits are very, very important. One is be articulate. You know, where being articulate is slightly different from having the gift of the gab. There are a lot of people who can talk their way out of anything, but when you are in a client facing, and I differentiate between client and customers. Customers, I would think, and this is my definition, not necessarily a dictionary definition. Customers are whom you sell products to. Clients are whom you sell a solution to. Right? That's how I would differentiate. That solution could be a service or a product, but it's a solution. And therefore, the first part is being articulate, that you're able to communicate what you want to say very, very effectively, either orally or in written form. That's number one. Second is being authentic. I have rarely, if at all, in fact, I can't recall any instance where you have conned your way to having a long-term client relationship. Maybe you can get one job, one sales by misstating something, but then you have lost the trust. Eventually, the client will come to know what you have represented versus what you haven't. So it's very important to be authentic. Say perhaps, for example, I will go to a client and say that, look, I have never done this before, but what you will find is that we have the technical expertise in this. We have not necessarily solved for this problem. We have some hypothesis, but what you will never find is that we will not be willing to work with you to solve this. We will stand right with you and we will work towards finding a solution. So being authentic is the second thing, which is very, very important. And the third thing, which is very critical, not just in this role, and it is important, more broadly as well, is being empathetic. Being empathetic means in this context is you understand what the other person is trying to communicate, even if they are not the most articulate, they are not the most communicative, and they could also not be telling you things for the fear that they could be exposing themselves or their mistakes, which is very natural. I don't take it as a negative.
So, Abhinav, I'm an introvert. I don't speak Hindi. I don't drink. I don't smoke. How much team bonding and networking am I missing out in Indian consulting workspace? Am I already starting out with one hand tied behind my back here?
I mean, I quit smoking when I was in MBA. I'm not an avid drinker. I do speak Hindi. Bonding with teammates can happen over various things, not necessarily going and partying in the evening, or let me not reduce the importance of those sutta breaks which which happen, but then find your own ways. I'm sure there are people who will have similar interests as you, talk about common interests. I don't think that's an handicap at all. It's for each one of it's very easy to imagine that everybody would be whoever smokes would be interested in chatting. But at the same time, it's important to find common interests. It's important to find common areas of work that you would want to do. And personally, I also think bonding is a bit overrated. I have always felt that if I am interesting enough, people will come and talk to me and ask me about things which are not necessarily related to work. And therefore, I've just focused on what I enjoy doing and what I would like to talk about. I've also, kind of been an introvert, but somehow I've always had people who have wanted to talk to me. Maybe I was lucky, or maybe I never thought about it so much that I need to do bonding. I would not place too much importance on it. Just go with the flow, see what works.
If there's a one advice you can give to the young change makers who are stepping into the world of consulting and public policy, so what is the one advice you can give them when they're going through hard phase, or like when they're stepping into the new world out of their universities, something very new culture and everything?
See, and I'll give an answer because this is my pet peeve. You know, uh, all of us have ambition, or most of us have ambition. There are some people who are okay with not being ambitious. It's important to be willing to put in what it takes to achieve the outcomes that you want. The outcomes could be that you want to grow fast, career wise. The outcomes could be that I'm okay to have a relatively decent career, not necessarily a superstar career, but I want to have a work life balance. It's not okay to have two conflicting goals and wanting the best of both worlds, because it's not fair. So and therefore prioritizing what is more important for you. And I'm not saying you have to put in 20 hours of work if you want to grow fast, but whatever is required. In consulting especially, there will be days where you have to work 20 hours on a Sunday, but on the same side there will also be Wednesdays where you will have no work. And therefore it's important to have that line of sight on the long term, that okay, maybe today I am putting in a lot of hard work, because also in consulting what happens most of the time, you're not in control of your own calendar. You are driven by what are clients' priorities, etc. And it's okay to take a break. I have had people who said, okay, for some time I don't want to do client facing work, I want to get into an internal role, because I'm starting a family, maybe there's a phase in my life where I'm too stressed, I don't want to focus too much on work. That's absolutely fine, as long as you don't have two conflicting. I will not pretend to understand what will work for you or for anyone. You have to find your own solution. But it's important to be very, very clear-eyed on objectives. And that's what will make life easier for you. That's what will make it more peaceful for you, and not being frustrated and angry at some things not working. That is very, very important.
So there are times when client or a customer is asking too much, or let's say over the top, right? So in that case, how do you align, the customer expectation with in regards with the organizational goals? How do you do that?
So to my mind, it has always been easy. The organization goal is to serve the client well. So they can't be, no organization is ever going to tell you, no, what the client is asking for is not aligned with what we want to do. So that's number one. Second, if you have built a good relationship with the client, and the client should have a trust that you are trying to do the right thing, and that's why it's important. And therefore, probably early on, when you're starting the relationship, maybe not a good idea to push back very early on. You have to be more selective about it. Not saying you should never push back, but you have to be more selective about it. But usually what I've seen, again, don't be reactive, but then sit with the client and say that, look, there's a lot of what you need done. Can we work with you to prioritize what needs to be done, because there's limited bandwidth available in the team? What do you think we need to do first? What do you think can wait for a bit of time? Or if it is all important, how do we ensure that we have the required bandwidth? Do we need to add people to the project? Do the commercials take a hit, and so on and so forth? One thing which I have always found useful is I've never referred to the work order or the contract once I've started the work. I never go back to the client and say, this is not part of our scope. Unless if you're doing that, probably the relationship has already broken down to an extent that it's not salvageable. And I always found working with the client, okay, how can we help you do this? We don't have the right skill sets in the team because the team was aligned to what was the initial goals, but happy to sort of help you with this. But how do we make it work? Whether it involves some commercials, whether it involves adding some people and so on, or whether it involves the client putting in some effort on their part and we guiding them. I have always found 99 out of 100 times you will come out of it with a great solution. There will be instances where it doesn't work and therefore you walk away. You don't have to be subservient, but at the same time, it's, I think, your responsibility to make it work as well.
Through your journey, how has definition of impact for you evolved? And especially when we talk about navigating trade-offs between like speed, sustainability, as well as scalability.
In terms of impact, I have always had a North Star, and that has worked for me. I don't know whether that's the right answer, but that has always worked for me so far. Eventually, who are you trying to help? And as I said in the beginning, who are you trying to make their lives easier? For whom are you trying to make their lives longer? Who are you trying to make a bit happier? If you have that line of sight on the end objective, I feel that defining impact will become easier. And therefore, one thing when we are not clear about the objectives of my work, I always go and tell my teams, your clients are not the people who are signing your checks or signing your contracts. Your clients are ultimately the people who are impacted by your work, right? And what I've always realized is that once you have that North Star, everything falls into place.
So how do you approach a challenge, like on-ground challenge? What do you understand first on the on-ground problems?
So I have a contrary view to that. Consulting is never new. It's the same thing. It comes in different colors, it comes in different qualities, shapes, and sizes. But to your point, again, I only look at two things, and I have always, not just me, I have seen most good consultants figure that out. What is the problem you're trying to solve, and what are the constraints you're working around that? And when I say what are the problem you're trying to solve, is not necessarily what you're hearing from your client. And always people ask me that, oh, consultants come to my company. Some clients have said they just put what we have told them on a nice deck, put in a more fancy manner, and present it back to us. And therefore, the core skill of a consultant, and to the earlier point as well, is not to know the business inside out. Obviously, with experience, you will develop some knowledge. But the core skill of a consultant is always to ask the right questions, and therefore to help arrive at what is the problem. Once you have understood the problem, once you have articulated the problem, trust me, with the whole internet at your disposal, with a lot of experts at your disposal, finding a solution, implementing a solution is the easier part. Not taking away anything from it, but getting to the right problem is the core skill of a consultant, and therefore consulting is always that. And in those four walls, I have always felt consulting never changes. And therefore, I am also a believer that as long as this is the part you're good at, I think it's difficult for AI. I will not claim that this will never happen. But as I see today, it's difficult for any tech or AI or any kind of non-human intervention to be great at. That is the only place where they say it doesn't matter what your undergraduate degree is, and you can go. And probably that's how I stumbled into. And I use the word saying stumbled into very, very deliberately. But see, eventually after 3 years, nobody is going to ask you where you studied, what you studied. I think the eventual value of your going to a good school or going through a good program is they have put in place a set of working principles, values that you will tend to use better, and second, to have that peer set. For example, when I went to my 15th reunion this last year, so many of my batchmates are at CXO level positions, and that cannot be undervalued. That's very, very strong value which that thing brings. But to that extent, whether you're an MBA or a master's in public policy or any other, I always say it's less important what degree or what program or what diploma you do versus what is the peer set that you're getting to study with or work with. And that's more important, because what you learn today, and again, as I said, in terms of hard skills, will not be relevant tomorrow. But the people that you work with, the set of principles that you decide on what you want to do is going to be very, very important.
Abhinav, since you are deliberately taking the term that you stumbled upon something, my question is on that line only. Sometimes we plan a lot and things tend to fail, and sometimes very random things, works wonders. So I'd like to ask you, what's something random that actually helped you in your career? Maybe some side skill, side hustle, maybe a hobby or something which has helped you greatly in your career, unexpectedly, of course.
And this is, see, let me also not take away, I would not suggest that don't plan for your life, right? just because it worked for me might not work for everybody. It's also important to plan ahead. But at the same time, one thing which is a very random skill, I enjoy reading, but not necessarily novels and books. I'll enjoy eating random articles, reading random things. I, जो विकिपीडिया में रैंडम आर्टिकल्स खोल के पढ़ रहे हैं फॉर गेटिंग, जिसको डूम स्क्रॉलिंग आजकल बोलते हैं सोशल मीडिया में, डूम स्क्रॉलिंग ऑन विकिपीडिया आई एम कीन ऑन. When I was a kid, my parents tell me that you used to get egg rolls wrapped in newspapers that day, so I used to read that piece of paper also. Uh, but what I found was that why that helped was anybody who I was speaking to, I could speak about things which was their interest, because somewhere I would have read something or would have heard something, and I have a decent memory, so that has also helped. Uh, in hindsight, and I have never tried to do it deliberately because then I have never enjoyed doing that. But somewhere that has helped me. Yeah, I don't think that's a skill I ever deliberately developed, but that was always useful.
If you had to reverse engineer your career into like a 3-part curriculum, so that you could train the future leaders in public policy consulting, so what would that modules be called, and what would be that one non-obvious experience or book that you'd mandate for each?
I'm not a big fan of reading books for the purpose of improving. That's not a popular opinion, but yeah, I would only suggest 2 skills. A, learn to listen, and listening is different from hearing. Active listening जिसको बोलते हैं. So I have always found that to be very, very important. And I've also not been good at it till very recently. I think I've gotten better. I was horrible at it early on. Secondly is the art of storyboarding. How do you tell a story? Whether it's in your work, whether you're talking to somebody. Because ultimately, any job is about conveying something or communicating something. Whether you're selling a product, whether it's a services business, whether it's you are in an internal role, or so on and so forth. It's about selling something, and therefore being able to communicate well. And storyboarding is a key part of it.
Abhinav, my question is regarding corporate feedback. So, in my early career experience, it has been my experience that feedback is often given in a very vague manner, and one can't really make sense of it at times. So, have you had opportunities where you've been given very vague feedback, and then how do you deal with such feedback?
I think it's a cultural thing, right? I think we as Indians are not great at giving feedback in general. Either we complain or scold, or don't say anything. That has to change. I think if we want to be great professionals, we have to be willing to give structured feedback, and feedback needs to be taken positively, not in a defensive manner. And one thing which I have also maintained is when somebody gives me feedback, I don't have to work on all of it. I figure out what is important for me to improve, and something which I should be just aware, okay, maybe I'm not great at it, but I'll live with it. And therefore, I think I have always felt it's important for me to elicit feedback rather than waiting for somebody to give me feedback. So one skill which I have developed, which has been useful, given the cultural context I just mentioned, that Indians are not great at giving feedback. I've always also heard Japanese are not great at it, but I've not worked with very many Japanese colleagues. I have always tried to see what are the subtle, non-feedback feedback. I have tried to articulate my own feedback from that person's perspective. And as long as you are true to purpose, in terms of what your own internal purpose and the organizational team's purpose, that should be okay. But I agree that at a more relatively early on, it is important to get structured feedback, and therefore setting that expectations with your manager, your supervisor, that I would really love. And there are people who like immediate feedback, that what is not wrong, you tell me. Versus some people who want to have periodic feedback sessions, or some people who just say, okay, no, I don't want to just tell me at the end of the year how I've done. So it's important for you to set those expectations with your manager, and also try to work with him or her to see what works better for both of you. I think, and then when you get into feedback sessions, I've always seen there was somebody in my team who used to come with a one-pager. That these are the 5 things I work on. Here as what I feel like that did well, not did well. And here, so she used to break down those things and made me easier to give structured feedback, even I'm not great at giving structured feedback, right? So, you can't help too much the person in front how they behave, but if you can help them along the way, that okay, maybe I'll put the structure if structured feedback works for you. There are people who are okay with more fuzzy feedback, but if structured feedback works for you, I'll feel help them give you structured feedback, break it down, what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear. uh, I know it's a bit of extra work, but I feel it should be worth it.
So you have worked in both systems, level consulting and community initiatives. So have you ever seen a big idea failing, which does not, is matching up with the local wisdom, and how to bridge that gap?
Oh, I have seen many more failures than successes. And I think that's the biggest acceptance which you should have when you're working in, especially in this space. It's important to fail fast. That's the only thing. Don't wait for 3 years for something to not work. Uh, do something quickly. If it is not working, fail fast, move on. One of my clients used to say there are multiple paths to reaching the top of Mount Kailash. You can take different paths, whatever works for you. Uh, I think failing fast is very, very important, and realizing what is failure rather than clinging on to it, and not be emotional about what your work is important. Uh, whether at community level system, you never know what will work, what will not work, and therefore it's important to understand what will failure look like, what will success look like, and identifying early on whether something you're doing is a failure or a success.
Consulting could be very consuming. It actually costs you your personal time even. So is it possible to have a work life balance when you're working in this field, or do I, if I could be a part of it, I have to sacrifice my grow like to grow my sleep, and like my weekends if I want to have fun.
So see, I'll not pretend it's an easy career, right? Consulting is a tough job, especially in terms of time, mainly because you are not in control of your timetable. You're always working at somebody else's pace, and it's a client whom it's not very easy to say no to or work with to set your own expectations. Having said that, I think I have seen things change, especially on the private sector side. With government, it is becoming tougher, but with private sector, you are able to set boundaries in terms of working on weekends, etc. But I have always believed in one fundamental principle: decide what is important for you in the short term and in the long term. If it's important for you to have a work-life balance, but you are okay with a relatively slower pace of career growth, that's absolutely fine. But it's important to recognize that upfront. What is not okay is to have conflicting outcomes that you need. You have to be willing to put in the grind when it's required. Uh, the good part about this profession is in most places it is flexible enough, right? That there will be times when you have to work 20 hours on a Sunday, but there'll also be times when on a Wednesday you don't have any work and you can go for an afternoon movie. So that's the good part. The bad part about it is unpredictable, and you will have those 20 hours days whether you like it or not. And therefore, it's important to be okay with it. So it's important to define your own objectives.
Like, what is that one mindset shift or habit that you would recommend to, like, graduating student or any sort of student to start from early on based on your experience?
Be curious. You know, all graduate, and people say that it is more so the case with Gen Zers, people who are young today, that they think they know everything. But trust me, it has always been true with youngsters, especially oldies. They say, well, we used to do things this way, this was the best view. That's also not necessarily true. But what is important always is to be curious, to listen, to not think you know everything, to give due importance to people who have done work, been there, done that. Also give importance to your other young colleagues. They might not do something better than you. And for the first few years of your career, just be a sponge. Just absorb everything. There will be setbacks. There will be things you don't like. It's life. You are no longer in that protected cocoon of your college, your home, your teachers. People who have all the right intent will take all the brickbats at them rather than directed towards you. you are now on your own, and therefore it's very important to be resilient and be curious. Rest everything will fall in place.
What are the things, hard skills that people should take very, very seriously?
Whatever is in vogue today. So for today, if people ask me what hard skills today, would be how to use AI tools, would be how to use technology, analytics, etc. Uh, but there's some hard skills, at least till now. I don't know whether it's going to change, especially because now I'm seeing PowerPoint slides, Excel, etc., being made by AI as well. But at least till now, I've seen so-called timeless skills are being able to work with the MS Office suites quite well, uh, being decent at numbers, if not great at it. Hard skills are transient. What might be relevant today might not be relevant tomorrow, but it's important to keep on reinventing yourself, keep on investing time in developing the more relevant hard skills. Soft skills are more critical in my view, no matter what line of career you're in, not just in consulting.
So, as we are reading, Abhinav, everywhere that AI is taking up many jobs, do you ever think that AI will take up consulting jobs as well in the near future? Is it possible?
I read a newspaper article today in the morning that how one of the large private sector banks has shed jobs this year, and it has doubled its investment in technology. Uh, I have a different take on it. I don't know whether I'm right or am I wrong. I always feel it will not be AI who will replace individuals. People who work with AI will replace people who don't know how to work with AI. It's like uh, I remember when I was interning, there used to be a whole visual aids team whom you would draw charts and send to, and they will translate it to PowerPoint and send it back. I don't think any firm has that team anymore. Uh, and therefore, technology will keep on evolving. It's important for you to keep on developing your skills, being more relevant to the market. What will be timeless is that problem solving skill that I said. If you're great at solving problems, if you're great at arriving at the right question quickly, which is the core skill of a consultant, I feel that will always be timeless. I could be wrong. I could be proven wrong in 5 years. With the way technology is changing, and I dread the day that it does. But I feel having that human touch, being empathetic, is something which is difficult, if not impossible, for tech to do.
What is something that people oftenly misunderstand about your journey or your role as a partner?
They think I have thought through and planned a lot of things. And as I said earlier, I've been very lucky to have great people around me. I've been very lucky in terms of circumstances. The universe has been kind to me. I've been fortunate to not to worry about some of the mundane things, so to say. My family had taken care of me that way. My teachers have been great. But I think the most important thing which people can probably, if they want to learn from me, is not to focus on too many things. It's also about going with the flow, making the best of what is there.
Do you mind recounting an incident of when someone surprised you with their exquisite soft skills?
Whether it's a soft skill or not, I don't know. I remember when I was an analyst, I was working with a joint secretary who recently retired a couple of years back. And till now, I tell him that I'm in this profession because you were my first client and I had so much fun working with you. Uh, there was an instance where there was a lot of pressure to do a particular type of report in the job, and I had never worked in that space. And I remember I was very despondent. There was a room full of very senior people. My partner was not able to attend that meeting, and I was sitting alone. And I was being asked questions. I did answer to the best that I could, but I let my frustration at my not knowing the answers show. And in hindsight, I feel that he realized that I'm feeling cornered and feeling frustrated at not having the answers. And he had that trust in me that it was not due to lack of effort or due to lack of trying that situation were. So I realized that he closed the meeting earlier than it was scheduled to. And then he sat me down and he asked that if you need to do this, what is the help you need? Who do you need to consult? What is it that you need to do? And I felt overwhelmed with, uh, you know, relief that, okay, now I can ask something what I need. And that was, I think, the greatest moment till now. I can say it with some uh, truth that that level of empathy, that level of willingness to help somebody across the table, I've seen in very few people, let alone senior government bureaucrats. There was a age difference, if I'm not wrong, of almost 35, 40 years at that age. And that skill to identify when the person is under stress without, most clients I'll see, oh, I don't care, I have hired you as a firm, you go get the work done, I don't know how you're getting. It's very easy to see those situations. But that that time has stuck in my head. And I've never told my client that that it was so important for me, that conversation. But I have tried to live that thought. I've always tried to see where somebody needs help if I'm able to provide. I'm not great at it yet. Uh, but yeah, I think as an analyst who was 3 months into his first project in government, I think that was godsend. And I'll never forget the kindness that that person showed me.
Abhinav, sometimes we are at a place, or should we say at a job, where we feel comfortable. All right, we are getting our job done, we are getting our regular works done, tasks done, but but that scenario could lead to stagnation. We are feeling stagnant. So in that scenario, should we hop for something else, look for the scope to, there is a room to where we can actually, rely on a more inquisitive, or should I say, I should switch the job and get something more, which would help me personally or my personality in so.
The day that I feel that I'm comfortable in my job should scare the living daylights out of you. You should be anxious about how will I do a part of my job. You should not be anxious to the extent that it starts affecting you mentally. Uh, and therefore, what I said, so for example, what they say, if you hear a lot of technology leaders talk today, that if it's a job which is repetitive, if it's a job where you're not innovating, if it's a job where you don't need to interact with others, you will probably be replaced sooner than later with tech, not someone else. How many organizations you go to where you see receptionists anymore, right? How many organizations do you go to where you see physical secretaries anymore? Those are fast dwindling careers, right? And therefore, it's important to reinvent, not just in terms of skills, but the role that you're doing. Whether the answer to that is changing your job or changing your role or enhancing your role depends on your circumstance. I feel if you have great people around you, uh, that is something you should always hold on to. Whether that means changing companies, whether that means changing your role, that depends on the circumstance. There's no one answer to it. For example, there are a lot of people who have now worked with me across 3 firms. So I have never felt that I've changed firms, though these people have stayed with me. But keeping on enhancing your role, taking on things which you are not necessarily very comfortable with, is very, very important continuously, and never feel comfortable in your role.
So, what I would like to ask next is very personal to me, and it's regarding career breaks. So, there are people like me who have taken career breaks for civil services preparation or a mental health break, and so on. And there seems to me that a large part of corporate associates a stigma with career breaks. So, do you really think that there's a different way in which people with career breaks are approached, and if there is a different way, how should they get around it?
I don't think there's a yes or no answer whether you want to take a career break or not. It depends on your circumstance. I am personally not a big fan of career breaks, but that's me. I can totally understand if somebody needs to take that break. It's important to have clear expectations when you're taking a break. It should not so happen, for example, if you are at a particular level when you're working, that you take a break for a year and expect to start at the next level when you come back. You would expect to start where you left off. So having those clear expectations, etc., is important. Secondly, whether you have kept on to your skill sets and you're not starting afresh. But in that instance, I think it's our responsibility to ensure that as and when the person who has took the career break is coming back, to test whether they're ready for coming back, number one. Second, that the expectations are laid out clearly. And third, also have that empathy that that person is coming back, especially if it's a longish career break, to give them some sort of a ramp that let them get used to the different lifestyle, whatever has been new, to give them some room to understand, and also work with them to make sure that it's easier, quicker, faster for them. Black and white decision about whether it's good or bad, if anybody is making, I think that's a wrong way to look at it. It has to be very contextual. I also sometimes test people who are interviewing whether them taking a career break has meant that they're not great at multitasking. So it's, but that's a thing which could be very, very contextual.
Yes.
And therefore it's important to test it out. But this is a hypothesis I always test for. That whether that career break was because they couldn't handle two things at once, or whether they thought it was important for them to take that break to do something else. I am told that you have some rapid fire questions. I hope I'm able to rapidly answer them.
Absolutely.
Shoot.
So my first question is, if you had to describe your entire career in 3 emojis, which would those be?
The dance emoji, the laughing out loud emoji, and a bit of poop emoji.
So and then what's the most hilarious and harmless rookie mistake that you have seen a junior consultant make?
Not paying attention to grammar.
And
It's not harmless.
so the harmless one.
Mistakes which are harmless, there's some harm, otherwise it's not a mistake.
Indeed. Yes.
But easily fixable, grammar.
What do you think is the most overrated perk of your job that people think is a great
Travel.
perk? And the most underrated?
Travel.
What do you think is the most overrated career advice?
Leadership. You are either a leader or you're not.
You are not. Okay. And in times of stress, what is your fuel of choice? Coffee, snacks?
Thumbs up.
Okay. And my final question is, before ending this interview, what is that one final myth about consulting that you would like to bust once and for all?
That it's glamorous. It's not. Thank you everyone for being here. Hope that was helpful, useful, and yes, a bit of fun for all of us. Thank you so much for everyone for being here and taking out the time on a weekend. Thank you so much.